With me in the studio to discuss this hour, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus is the former international spokesman for the IDF. He's now a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies. Welcome, Jonathan. We're also joined by our host and correspondent, Nicole Zedek. Welcome, Nicole. And Asher Fredman joins us from Jerusalem tonight. Asher is the executive director of the Misgav Institute for National Security. Welcome to you, Asher, as well. So, Jonathan, we'll get to the latest on the negotiations, and Nicole has some news for us as well on that and the situation in Gaza. But I want to ask you and Asher for your reaction to those comments by the Saudi journalist Al-Hamis. Just as Prime Minister Netanyahu was doing in Washington, Al-Hamis also spoke about this, uplifting vision of peace and prosperity for everyone in the region. But there was an implicit threat in there as well, that if Israel does not grant the Palestinians a state, none of it can happen, and Israel could lose the support of the Arab world.
I think it was more than just implicit. It was quite blunt, and he repeated it, I think, 3 times in different iterations. I suppose he is there at the behest of the crown, the Saudi kingdom, and the rulers there, so he isn't speaking out of his own accord. And I think that it's not new. I mean, the content of what he's saying isn't new. It's pretty much aligned with what the Saudi Foreign Ministry has been issuing statements for the better part of a year and a half, almost 2 years, since October 7. They've been hardlining on that there must be, from their perspective, a Palestinian state for there to be any substantial developments when it comes to normalization with Israel. So that isn't new. The fact that he's here in Israel, that is interesting. But I was actually hoping for a bit more positivity and a bit less threats in those statements. And bottom line, I think this doesn't bode well, because putting all of that emphasis on Palestinian statehood in this current time, in the political climate in Israel, which I think is overwhelmingly against it, and in my opinion, for very good reason, that doesn't bode well for the chances of really normalizing ties with Saudi Arabia, because I don't think Israel is going to do that.
They all agree they want Hamas out of Gaza. They don't want Hamas running Gaza any more than Israel does, well, perhaps not as much as Israel does, but they don't have a solution on how to disarm Hamas, how to exile Hamas. There are no solutions there, and we know that Egyptian peace plan, of course, didn't even mention Hamas. So how do you square this circle?
Yeah, and it's that problem is compounded because the Palestinian Authority has proven to be such a tremendous failure. And it is quite devastating that that authority exists, but it is despised by Palestinians. It supports terror activity. It is not trusted by Israel, and I think Israel sees it as either a clear enemy or a very potential enemy. And that Palestinian Authority has said no 4 times to very sincere and generous Israeli peace offers. And that, I think, puts the whole situation in kind of a very difficult and kind of rigid situation. What I think it will be needed will be for Gulf states and Egypt to make a difficult strategic leadership decision. What do they prefer? Do they prefer Muslim Brotherhood, like Hamas, which will influence their own domestic political situations? Or are they going to be willing to say, we've had enough with 77 years of pampering to Palestinian aspirations, and we're going to prioritize our own and regional prosperity? Eventually, they'll have to choose which one it is. I don't think that they can have both. And I think that Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan are very wary of a situation where Hamas is able to emerge victorious and to claim victory against Israel, because that can have a very dangerous halo effect in the Middle East of Muslim Brotherhood coming to the fore.
So, Jonathan, should the IDF hold on to the Morag corridor if it is a deal breaker?
I think Nicole explained the importance very well, and I would only add that we're talking about shaping the future of the Gaza Strip, and really either availing Israel to kind of detach between, or to distinguish between Hamas and the civilian population. The way that Israel can do that is by actually creating or dissecting the Gaza Strip into 2. The southern part, west or south of the Morag corridor that we can see on the map, would be controlled by Israel, and humanitarian aid would be provided there not through the hands of Hamas and the UN, but through the GHF and controlled by Israel. And the northern part would be an area that Hamas would probably still control, where they will still be fighting. That's why the Morag corridor is so important, and I think it is a valuable thing to really insist on, because without that, I struggle to see how Israel can shape the day after in Gaza, and probably Israel will have to go in and take it again after 60 days of fighting. Another point worth making is, of course, Hamas is absolutely adamant that there will be a presidential guarantee that Israel won't go back to fighting after 60 days. And that's also an important part of the picture.
With me in the studio, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus from the FDD. So, Jonathan, if Gaza is complex and difficult and frankly very depressing, Lebanon is kind of a success story for the IDF and Israel, isn't it? Israel has complete freedom of action in southern Lebanon right now.
Well, so far it's definitely looking better than the situation in Gaza, I agree. But we are not out of the woods yet. Yes, very positive things have happened in Lebanon. Yes, there's a political process by the elected government, supported by the US and to a certain extent France, which is calling for the collection of weapons and having the monopoly of the use of force in the hands of the government and military that actually serves Lebanese interests and not the interests of Iran. That's great. However, Hezbollah won't disarm, and I don't think that they will capitulate. They won't give up their military capabilities. That's really a core asset for them, and I think that they won't go down without a fight. And we haven't discussed, and this connects to Gaza, positive things may happen, and a lot of people have been speaking and insinuating about perhaps normalization, Abraham Accords with Lebanon as well. There are about 550,000 so-called Palestinian refugees in Lebanon in 12 different UNRWA-managed camps. Many of them are second and third generation so-called refugees, which that issue needs to be settled as well. So while there's tremendous positive steps being
They don't have Lebanese citizenship, they're not allowed to work, they're kept in perpetual refugee status.
Yes, they are kept in the same kind of perpetual, very negative situation. You can compare them to people in Gaza who are also kept kind of hostage. They're hostage by the Egyptians, and in Lebanon, these people are held hostage by UNRWA and by decisions of the Lebanese state. So positive things, but still a lot of complexity.
So, Jonathan Conricus, is it a case of unfinished business with Iran?
Yeah, to put it simply, if we look at this big picture, and yes, there's battle fatigue in Israel when we're now focused on trying to maybe get a ceasefire in Gaza. That may or may not happen. But if we look at it big picture-wise, a lot hinges on the Iranian regime. As long as that regime is in place, then I think we will have instability and we will have enemies that are equipped with advanced weaponry that are guided to keep on fighting against the state of Israel. And to sow this instability and, of course, expand that kind of hegemony that the Iranian regime is about in the Middle East. As long as the regime exists, that is what we will have to deal with. So it's not a black and white situation, but I think in that sense it's rather simple. And what I think Israel is now shifting towards is to build a long-term program which really puts the regime at the center of efforts, where the efforts will be across the board. We're talking military. I assume that they will be below threshold and more on the covert side, less on the overt side, but then economic, information, diplomatic, and any other things that Israel can do, hopefully not alone, until that regime either changes its course strategically and ceases to try to annihilate the state of Israel, or is overrun and dismantled from within. As long as that doesn't happen, then we will have Hamas or another iteration of it, and Hezbollah will become Hezbollah 2.0, maybe things in Jordan, the Houthis in Yemen, and whatever other abomination the Iranians will be able to fund and equip.
The head of the snake, as the Saudis once called it.
Yep.
Jonathan Conricus, great to talk to you as always. We appreciate it. Thank you.